This conference will now be recorded.
Everyone, thank you for joining. Can you hear me? Thank you, Prashant. Thank you, Dinesh. Hi, Akhil. I cannot hear you. Okay. Prashant, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Today we are starting a new tool. That's Docker. Prashant, what is Docker and what do you know about this tool, Docker?
Mm, it is a containerization tool wherein virtualization has gone in, or rather than, of course, implementing that on the hardware environment, on a what you can say, on a bare metal environment, it is actually implemented on top of OS. So
Okay.
you can say an entire space that is there in the OS is bifurcated into many different parts,
Mm-hmm.
and different part is virtualized.
Advantages of containerization, Prashant.
We can, of course, the primary advantage of containerization is, in fact, in virtualization. In fact, even after we noticed that there was a quite a significant achievement wherein we reduced the. I mean, the utilization was high, but there was some gray part, in fact, wherein still the utilization was not there. So now what we can
Okay.
do is, in fact, with containerization, of course, that gray part is also covered, and wherein we can host multiple sites, multiple applications on a same go, rather than one application on a one virtualized environment.
Vishal, any inputs on Docker? What do you know about it? Nafis.
Mm, Yes, I think yeah we had used Docker in our one of the softwares for the
Very
so
good.
we had
So
created it.
you already have working experience in Docker.
Yes, we had created the images from the Python application that we had written that used to create those Docker files, and we used to run those
Use
images
that
on
image
GitHub.
to create
Yeah,
containers.
yes.
So where did you save those images? You used to download them from up.docker.com.
No, we used to run that directly on the GitLab. So there was a we had that
Your own
all
local.
Python code stored on the GitLab, and we used to push that image there. And doing CI of the GitLab portion, it used to run that directly there.
Anything more, you know?
A Docker we can use as a platform, service as a platform, correct? That
Okay,
gives
you're
you the
right.
host level virtualization.
Perfect. Yes, anything more, Nafis? Anything more, Vishal?
Mm, no, that's all I know about.
Okay, you just used to download the libraries and then using the Docker file created the containers.
Yes,
That's it, not more than that.
no.
Hello.
Yes, okay.
Sunil, it is a repository of software. Can
Mm-hmm.
on first day we have discussed about it. Like we can get through the Docker, whatever the OS we need, we can get
Mm-hmm.
through the Docker.
Yes. Infrastructure provisioning.
Mm,
Okay. Okay.
mm.
So let's proceed. First point, what is Docker? Any tool when you're starting, first you should know what is Docker. If anybody asks you what is Jenkins, it's a CI/CD tool. What is Docker? Docker is a containerization tool.
Hey Sunil, excuse me. This is Vikas. For some reason, I can hardly hear you, barely hear you.
Yes, for me
Same
also,
here,
Sunil.
same destiny. You are not properly audible.
Okay. Check settings. Hello.
Yes, Sunil.
Is it better now?
It's still the
Can
same.
I? Yeah.
Better now?
No, Sunil, it's almost same.
Almost the same.
It sounds like your microphone is too far.
Okay. One.
If you could actually check those settings in GoToMeeting, because for me, GoToMeeting keeps on changing some settings days in and out. So
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Sunil, you're audible. The only problem is you're not very clear. I mean, the normal talk we can easily understand, but when things will come to the technical things, we might have some difficulty.
Okay, give me some.
Nasreen,
This conference will now be recorded.
First point, Docker Docker is a containerization tool. What is Docker? Docker is a containerization tool. Now we should know what is containerization. So containerization is next level to virtualization. The containerization technology is next level to virtualization. So definitely we should compare containerization with virtualization. Containerization tool versus virtualization. Virtualization we already have experienced. So we already know, most of us already worked on virtualization. Example for virtualization tool is VMware, isn't it? I have it here because VMware workstation. See, my requirement is to work with Red Hat Linux. If my requirement is working with Red Hat Linux, so what I have done, please observe here. I have a laptop with 8 GB RAM and then 1 TB hard disk. So to run this hardware, we have what operating system? What operating system I have installed? Windows 10. On top of Windows 10, I have installed virtualization technology called VMware. Is it? This is VMware. So this is the VMware. So this is the VMware I have installed. On top of VMware, I have installed whatever the operating systems I want. Let's say I want Red Hat Linux, I have installed Red Hat Linux. The main point is, in case of virtualization, you need to allocate hardware resources. In case of virtualization, you need to allocate hardware resources. For example, if you want to run my Red Hat Linux operating system, yes, I can assume it. Yes, Red Hat Linux is running. Then also open my terminal and run Linux commands. To run this virtualization, it needs a hardware components. Where can I see the hardware components which are allocated to this particular virtual machine? Right click, go to settings. This Linux machine, for this Linux machine to run, I have allocated 3.9 GB, so almost 4 GB RAM I have allocated. Out of 8 GB RAM, 50% of the RAM I have allocated to this Linux machine. This Linux machine will run on by using how much memory? 4 GB of RAM. Next, what else I have allocated? 60 GB of hard disk I have allocated. Out of 1 terabyte, I have allocated 60 GB. Next, how many processors I have? It need a computing capacity. Computing can be possible by using processors. I have allocated 1 processor. Number of cores is 2, processor is 1, so I have allocated. To run the Red Hat Linux, we need to allocate 4 GB, 20 GB, we need to allocate RAM, hard disk and CPU. Next, the problem with the virtualization is, Nafis, let's say if I want one more VM, Red Hat is already running. Let's say I need one more VM. Okay, let's say I want Windows Server 2002, 2012 or whatever it is. Now if I want one more VM, so it will be very slow, practically impossible, because total RAM I have is 8 GB. So for this is actual operating system, right? This is called as host operating system. The actual operating system which is running the hardware layer is called as host operating. That is what is my actual operating system? My actual operating system is Windows 10. So for that it needs minimum 4 GB to run this Windows machine. And one more VM to run it is consuming 4 GB. So almost RAM is full. If you create one more virtualization, one more VM, so it will definitely run. It will be very slow. It will be very slow. So the problem with the virtualization is you need to allocate fixed hardware of resources. You need to allocate fixed hardware of resources. Whereas containerization technologies like Docker, okay. So what Docker will do? So with this is the hardware layer. Actual operating system. System. Instead of VMware, instead of virtualization technology, I install containerization technology, that's Docker. On Docker, you can run a container. Container is something like a VM, as you visualize. Here it's called as a virtual machine. Here it is called as a container. So I can create a Red Hat container, or I can create a Tomcat container. I can create a MySQL container. Whatever the technology you want, what are the application you want Tomcat, you can create a Tomcat container. If you want database, you can create a MySQL container. If you want, you can create a Jenkins container. Whichever you want, you can create it. Whichever software you want, you can create it as in the form of a container which runs on Docker. And you don't need to allocate RAM to these containers. You don't need to allocate the hard disk for the container. You don't need to allocate the operating system, the processing capacity for this container. It dynamically uses the hardware based on the availability. Whereas in VMware, as I shown you, practically every virtual machine you need to allocate 3 components: RAM, hard drive, and CPU when you're creating a virtualization. Moreover, containerization removes guest operating system layer. What do you mean by guest operating system layer? For example, you want to install Tomcat on VM. On VM, you cannot directly run Tomcat. On VM, you need to allocate hardware resources to operating system layer. On top of operating system, you can create a Tomcat. Anything you need to create on operating system. In case of virtualization, the final application needs to run on an operating system. There is a dependency on the operating system in case of virtualization. You cannot run Tomcat as a virtual VM. You cannot run Tomcat as a VM. You cannot run Jenkins as a VM. You need to run operating system on top of operating system. Which operating system? This is called as guest operating system. The virtualization technology needs guest operating system. So there are two operating system layers. One is host operating system, which is actually running the hardware. One will be guest operating system. In case of virtualization technology, so if you want Tomcat running on VM, so you need to create a guest operating system. On top of guest operating system, you need to connect to that particular Red Hat Linux and install VM using the command C. See, you need to run the commands and install whatever software you want. Finally, you need to have an operating system layer. So in case of virtualization technologies, you will find two layers of operating system. One is the host operating system, the other one is guest operating system. So if Tomcat needs more RAM, if Tomcat is busy, it needs more RAM. So what happens is Tomcat will communicate to its underlying operating system that is called as guest operating system layer. Guest operating system layer will communicate to VM will talk to Windows 10, and from there the hardware is allocated. So you have more number of iterations, so performance will be low in case of virtualization because there are more layers to communicate. Whereas if here Tomcat needs more hardware resources, it will communicate to Docker. I'm right. Docker will communicate to operating system, and from there the hardware is allocated. So comparatively, virtualization will be slow. Performance will be slow when compared to container. Containerization will have a better performance. First advantage, because there is no guest operating system layer. We have eliminated operating system dependency. See, Tomcat is running directly on Tomcat. Tomcat is not running on any operating system. MySQL database running as a container. There is no dependency on operating. It's not running on operating system. It's running on Docker. Docker technology or containerization technology. 90% of the containerization technology is Docker in the world now. Docker eliminates the need for what guest operating system. There is no requirement to run a guest operating system. You can directly run any application you want, whichever you want on Docker. So there is no dependency on application layer, sorry, operating system layer. That's what Docker will do. Second advantage, so performance will be better. Second advantage, we are not allocating hardware resources at the time of creating the container. You cannot say Tomcat should use only 2 GB of RAM. MySQL should use only 1 GB of RAM. There is no concept of physically allocating the fixed hardware resources at the container level. Basing on the availability, basing on the requirement, it dynamically Docker uses the hardware. So you can let's say on 8 GB RAM, you can create 10 containers, no problem. It gets created. All the 10 containers will be running state. Whereas in VM, maximum if you create a second container, because of only 8 GB of RAM, it will be slow. Whereas here Docker, you can create 10 containers on 8 GB of memory. So these are the two important advantages what containerization is doing. So when compared to virtualization. So first advantage, there is no fixed allocation of hardware resources at the container level. First advantage. Docker eliminates the need for guest operating system layer. Docker containers runs on process isolation. Understand the term called process isolation. Chanakya, what is process isolation? Process isolation is nothing but removing the dependency on operating system layer. So containers does not need an operating system. Container needs a platform called as Docker. That's it. There is no need for operating system layer. So these containers runs on process isolation. Process isolation, it's isolated containers. There is no dependency on operating system. So because of that, as you have removed one operating system layer, so performance will be better. That's it. These are the two important advantages of containerization when compared to traditional virtualization technology. Any questions in understanding the advantages of containerization? Satyam, did you understand?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Sunil, this is Vikas. Sorry, I have very basic understanding on the platform side. What's the difference between the platform versus the OS? So Docker is a platform. VMware, in VMware, you need to install the OS. So, I mean, basically, you are replacing
Here,
VMware with.
here Docker is a platform because
Mhm.
in here when you compare VMware is a platform, is it?
Yeah.
We need to compare these two technologies, Docker versus VMware. Both are platforms.
Okay.
Okay. So when you want to run an application on VM, because
Yeah.
if you want to run a Tomcat application on VM, you cannot directly run Tomcat on VM. You
Right.
need to install an operating system on VM. On top of operating system, you need to install Tomcat. Am I right?
Yep.
That's what virtualization works. So virtualization needs any application. If you don't run it on virtualization, you need an operating system.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas any application, if you want to run it on containerization platform, you don't need operating system.
So
Got it?
that means your application will be directly working on the Docker.
Docker. This is called process isolation. Eliminating the need for guest operating system can be done in containerization tools. Okay, Vikas?
So in
Got it,
another
Vikas?
word, can we say like Docker is like a, well, it's not an operating system, but it is kind of an operating system where
It's kind of
or
an
no?
operating system. That's why the term is containerization.
Okay.
It's not an operating system, then it is what? It is containerization tool. These kind of tools are called as containerization tools. Okay.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Any questions, Nafis?
Yeah.
Dinesh?
No, Sunil, no questions.
So we all know advantages of containerization. No fixed location of hardware systems. Containers runs on no, there's no need for operating system dependency. That's it. This is containerization tool. Example of containerization tool is Docker. Now let's have a look at some theory. Docker is a containerization tool. In comparing to virtualization, when virtualization we allocate fixed hardware allocation, we know that. Containerization, no fixed hardware allocation. Process isolation, that's it. Dependency on operating system is removed in containerization. That's it. These are the two advantages, main differences between virtualizations and containerizations. In comparison to traditional virtual functionalities of hypervisors, hypervisors are nothing but VMware or Oracle VirtualBox. These are hypervisors. In comparison to traditional hypervisors like VMware, Docker containers eliminate the need for a separate guest operating system for every new virtual machine. Docker implements a high-level APIs to provide a lightweight containers which runs on process isolation. That means it does these Docker does not need any operating system. The Docker containers enable rapid deployment with minimum runtime requirements. It also ensures better management and simplified portability. It helps developers and operations team for rapid development of application. How does Docker helps the development team and operations team? Dinesh, how does Docker helps development team and operations team? Can you give a scenario?
Can download the required software from the Docker IS.
Okay. How does Docker bridges the gap between development team and operations team? Akhil?
Hello. Yeah, Sunil, generally, if there is any requirement of installing any OS or anything, there will be some kind of time requirement, notice period. So
Yes.
through Docker, we can to easily. I mean,
Okay,
no gaps will be
next. Okay, look at this. Development team needs as part of their developmental activities, they want backend as Oracle database.
Basically, we don't need to think about any component while writing the code. I
Yes,
mean, biggest advantage of using Docker, right? Sometimes we
exactly.
require some component and all.
We don't need to learn the technology. Without learning the technology, you can provide the infrastructure, isn't it, Nafis? That's what you're planning to say,
Ye-
isn't it?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes. Look at this. Please look at this. Development team, let's say they need Oracle database 18c version. They want this particular database because, right, let's say development is team currently working on MySQL SQL Server database. Now they don't want to use SQL Server database. They want to see how the application is behaving if they, instead of using SQL Server, if they use Oracle 18c database. So it is whose responsibility to provide Oracle 18c database to the development team. Obviously, it's a database administrator, DBA. In the market, you'll find Oracle DBAs, isn't it? So the DBA responsibility is to take a hardware, install the Oracle database on that particular hardware, and provide the credentials to the development team. So what the manager will do, the project manager, he shoots a mail to the operations team. So it's part of operations team responsibility to provide the database, whatever database layer or application server or web server. It's the operations team responsible. Development team shoots a mail to operations team saying that as part of our developmental activity, we want Oracle database 83 version as soon as possible. Please provide it. Please provide it. This is mail we generally given from the development team to the operations team. So what the ops team will reply?
You need to do a
The,
feasibility check
the
and
operations
also
team. Yeah, yeah. Please, Roshan, tell me what the operations team
you
is
have to
responsible.
do a feasibility check. Also need to check, make the systems
Hardware
available.
availability. Hardware availability.
Yeah.
Isn't it, Roshan? And the skilled resources should be available. You need to have a
Yes.
DBA as part of operations team. So operations team
Mm.
will respond to development team saying that we don't have an Oracle database administrator. The skilled resource is not available. Very big companies, ad hoc requirements development team will give may not be available. The skilled concern, skilled resource may not be available. So if a DBA is not available, what can operations do? They need to hire the DBA. So we are planning to hire the DBA. So skill set is not available. Skilled resources are not available for that to achieve to provision the requirement of the development team. So what is happening here? Delay because of skill set. Option two, DBA is available. As Prashant said, hardware is not available. All the servers are full. We need to provision the hardware. We need to allocate the hardware. For that, you need to give at least 1 week of time. So giving ad hoc requirements at the neck of the moment and asking the infrastructure is not accepted. So you need to give us some time. So these kind of responses, you will get it in the operations team. Either the skilled resource is not available or the hardware or server will not be available. Yes, there is scarcity of server all over the world. So because of which, what is happening here finally? Delay. There comes, there as a DevOps engineer, you will jump into the picture. You will come into picture. So using Docker, we don't know Oracle DBA. We don't need to learn install Oracle DBA. Using the tool called as Docker. Using a tool called as Docker, you can jump into picture and you can provide Oracle database 18c version just in 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. If actually the resource is available, he will take approximately 2 to 3 days to provide the infrastructure. The same infrastructure you can just do and provide them the infrastructure details in just 5 minutes by using the tool called as Docker. using a tool called as Docker. So as I told you in the image, on top of Docker, we'll be creating an Oracle container and providing the container details to the development team. So development team, instead of waiting for the operations team to respond, they'll use our container which we have provided, and then they'll start developmental activities. That's why Docker is also referred as infrastructure provisioning tool. You can provide the infrastructure. Development team says that, okay, we need a Linux operating system. Yes, we can provide it using Docker. Development team says that I need Tomcat. Yes, we can provide it using Docker. I need WebLogic. Yes, we can provide it on Docker. Best just by running 2 to 3 commands, what are the infrastructure development team wants, here we are providing it. And so that's the reason Docker, look at the statement. So this helps developers as well as the operations team in the rapid development of an application. We remember the first theory concept, the need for DevOps engineer is to speed up the development process. Am I right, Ananya? The main motive behind the DevOps team, the main motive of our DevOps team is to speed up as fast as possible to deliver the project. Am I right? So here comes the need for
Yes,
it. Here comes the need for a Docker. Clear about this? Okay. So you now know what is Docker. You also know the advantages of containerization when compared to installation. Advantages, you know. So why waiting? Let's learn how we install Docker. As usual, let's log into AWS. What was yesterday's session, Prashant? 8 p.m.
Yesterday there was heavy rains in Chennai, so no lectures.
Cancel.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Yes, sir. It was cancelled.
Waiting in Ubuntu machine. What machine it is?
Sunil, can we use Amazon Linux or else Red Hat Linux also instead of Ubuntu?
Yeah. Gopi, how are you practicing? Can you hear me, Gopi? Connected. I have connected to this Ubuntu machine I have built. Now how to install Docker? Go to site get.docker.com. Installing Docker is just a matter of 2 commands. You also go to your AWS account and get that infrastructure ready. This is a script which is quick and easy install via these 2 commands. Only 2 commands you should run to install Docker. And whenever, very important, whenever you are practicing Docker or you're working with Docker, make sure, because Docker needs to complete the hardware resources, the actual hardware resources. So always work from root user. Okay, so right now you collected $prompt. Go to hash prompt. Hash prompt is a root user, you know it. Whenever you're installing Docker, whenever you're creating containers, whenever you're running Docker related commands, whatever you're practically working with Docker, please switch to root user practice. First command will download get-docker.sh. And next command will run that particular file. Let's take the time. Done. Docker is installed. How to check whether Docker is installed or not? Docker Docker 19.03. Docker is installed. Okay. So we have learned installing Docker is just 2 commands. Okay, you know that. Okay. Now let's try to understand some terminologies. We need to be very clear with 4 terms which we'll be using in our day-to-day activities when you're dealing with Docker. You should understand the term Docker image. What is Docker container? What is Docker host? What is Docker client? These are the 4 terminologies which we should be familiar with. I just want to start with Docker host. What is Docker host? What is Docker host? Because we have installed Docker in which machine? In our
The
AWS
Ubuntu,
machine.
yeah,
Ubuntu
the
machine.
Ubuntu machine.
So let's go to that machine. So Vishal, this is the machine where we have installed Docker. The
Mm-hmm.
machine on which Docker is installed, that machine is called as Docker host. So this is our Docker host. So whenever I'm referring the word Docker host is nothing but the machine on which Docker is installed. Okay, so that's first term, Docker host. Next terminology. What is Docker client? The terminal in which we are running Docker related commands. So this is a command, Docker ---- version is a command to know the version of Docker. So where are you running this Docker commands? In a terminal. What is our terminal? Our terminal is git bash. In this terminal, you are running Docker commands. So this is called as Docker client. Docker client is an environment wherein which you are running Docker commands. Here I am running Docker commands in the git bash terminal. So our client is git bash. So Docker client is not, whenever I'm referring to Docker client, it's terminal where in which you are running Docker commands. So you now know what you mean by Docker client. It's an environment where we are running the Docker commands is called as Docker client. Next, you should understand image and container. The actual hardware layer. Definitely you need an operating system to run that hardware. That is called as what? Host operating system. In my case, it is Windows 10 is my host operating system. It's nothing but on that I install. Here our host operating system is operating Ubuntu. On top of Ubuntu, what I have done, I have installed Docker. If development team needs Tomcat as a DevOps engineer, we will be creating Tomcat container. If development team needs MySQL, we can create a MySQL container on top of Docker. If development team needs Tomcat or if a development team needs Jenkins, we can create a Jenkins container. So whatever the development team needs, infrastructure requirements, we can meet them using this Docker. This is container 1. It could be MySQL, Tomcat, WebLogic, this container 2, this container 3. So finally, what will be running on Docker? Containers will be running on Docker. If you want to run a container, it's a two-step process. If you want to create a container on Docker, it's a two-step process. Step 1, you need to download image. Step 2, you need to run the image. That's it, very simple. Whenever you need a container, you need to follow a two-step process. You need to download the image and you need to run the image. It's very simple. Let's say I want the application called something called Notepad++. On my laptop, I want this Notepad++ to be installed. So what we'll do? First, we'll download Notepad++ from Google. It will be exe file, and then we run the exe file. Am I right? In the same way. In the same way. If you want to create a container, it's a two-step process. First, you should download the image. How to download the image? So there will be one command, docker xyz is one command. So when you run the command, what will happen? The image will be downloaded. Step 2, what you should do? You should run the image. So there will be one more command. When you run that command, the image will be executed and container gets created. That's it. So from where, how to download? There will be one command to download. There will be one command to download the image. Okay, image will be downloaded. There will be one command to run the image. The image will be executed. Finally, what will happen when you run the image? The container gets created. First, we should download the image. You will come across questions like, Sunil, okay, you're saying we should download, but I have a question. From where I should download? From where I should download? That's important. You are saying, we are saying, I'm saying I'm downloading the image. From where I'll anyways explain that. But to have a container, look at the steps. You need to know the steps. Download the image. From where we should download, I'll explain anyways. Run the image. Container gets created. Okay. So, understanding the term called, yes, you are right, Charlie. Understanding the term called Docker image. We should be comfortable with 4 terms: Docker images, Docker containers, Docker host, Docker client, and anyways we have already understood Docker host and Docker client. Let's try to understand image. Image is nothing but a combination of binaries and libraries. Some libraries which are necessary for one software application. Obviously, if you need Tomcat, we'll download that particular image. If you need MySQL, we download that particular image. So that you need to download that related libraries and binaries. First you should download. So image is, what is image? Image is combination of binaries and libraries. Okay. Container. When image is installed, comes into running condition. When you run the image, then it is called as what gets created? Container gets created. When you run the image, container gets created. Hi Binoop, how are you? So image is combination of binaries and libraries. Image is combination of binaries and libraries, and you know how I will see practicals how to download the images, and we'll see how to run the image and how to see the containers, from where we should download the image, how can we see list of images, how can we see list of all the containers. We'll see. Docker host. Machine on which Docker is installed is called as Docker host. Docker client, terminal in which we run the Docker related commands. Here we are using a terminal called as git bash, so that is called as Docker client. So these are the 4 terminologies now we are familiar about. Rajendra, any questions?
No.
So there, Akhil.
Hello.
Yes, Akhil, tell me.
Sunil, one small doubt. Like this will be installed. It will not be like to the dev or production or any server, right? Only for the machine level, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
But how the Docker will get like from Git bash only through website, or can we go through directly and install through AWS?
No, what's your
Now
question? Your question is how to install Docker.
we no, not like that. We gone through the Git bash, no, to download Docker.
These are the 2 commands we have used to download Docker.
Yes. Yes. Is there any another option like going through the web? I mean UI.
Graphical
This
user
is we
interface.
okay.
No, no, no.
Okay.
No, there's no other way. These are the commands which you need to run it. Generally, we install Docker on Linux operating system. You can install Windows
Okay.
operating system, but this is the process.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. But
Yes.
Sunil, I have a doubt.
Yes. Yes, Dinesh.
You said like we can create a Linux machine using Docker, right?
Yes.
So then, what is the use of creating EC2 instance in AWS? We can create directly using Docker, right? I mean, like without going for AWS.
Where the client wants AWS infrastructure. Huh? Dinesh,
Hmm.
now your point is,
Yes, Sunil.
what is the need for this machine?
Yeah, no, I mean, not this mission and other missions like QA or prod, somehow whichever we can creating. See, for installing Docker, we need to have one
QA
Linux mission.
prod,
That
if a client is running on cloud, QA prod, production test instances, they are also easy to mission. Dinesh,
yeah, we can install using Docker, right? Instead of going for AWS.
how are you allowed to install Docker on the development instance, test instance, or production instance, which is used for a specific client? No,
No, no,
it's
no,
the
no.
same
I'm not
infrastructure.
asking that. See, I'm not asking that, Sunil. See, we are. You said like Docker using Docker, we can create one Linux machine. Is it right?
Yes, you're right.
So instead of going to AWS console and creating Linux instance, we can create normal EC2 instance using Docker. That's what I'm asking. Is it possible or not?
you mean to say you want to install Docker on this laptop?
No, Sunil, not about Docker installation.
Mm-hmm.
See, for installing Docker, we need to have one operating system, Linux operating system. That I got the point.
Okay.
Only
So
Linux
for
operating
install,
system. You can use Windows as well. You just need
okay,
a host
okay,
operating system to actually work on it.
okay. That's not my question. Like, not installing Docker is not my question.
No.
From Docker, where can we create EC2 install? I mean, like Linux machine. That's what I'm asking. From Docker, using Docker, we can.
100%. You can create.
Yeah, that's what. So no need of going for AWS, right? At that time, like going to
No,
EC2.
no,
Hello.
not required.
Okay, Sunil.
Okay. Any questions, Satyam? So practicals of Docker. So today we had a theoretical understanding. We are familiar about the terms. What is Docker host? What is Docker client? What is an image? Image is nothing but combination of binaries and libraries. And then tomorrow's we'll see practically how to download the image. From where we should download the image and what is the command to download the image. First, how to run the image. So the container gets created container and how can we connect to that container also. We'll see all these practicals of Docker from our tomorrow session. Okay. Thank you all. Thank you, Vakil. Vinu.
Thank you, Sunil. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sunil. See you tomorrow.